For our top news story, the UN has warned that humankind, I can think that's us, is stuck in the spiral of self-destruction. Our coronavirus story is apparently more than half of Americans show signs of prior COVID infection. In technology, there's an algorithm. It has opinions about your face. In environment, net zero by 2050 will hit a major timing problem that technology can't solve. We need to think not only of technology, but about cutting consumption. Is that possible? For materials, now electronics can grow on trees thanks to nanocellulose paper semiconductors. In space, apparently there should be more evidence of alien technology than alien biology across the Milky Way. Why can't we find alien technology? In biology, apparently brains and bronze have helped crows and ravens, I didn't know this was true, but crows and ravens to take over the world. I thought it was us. For humans, there's apparently a new dimension to a meaningful life, appreciating beauty. And for our thing on us as well, apparently there's a 3-treatment combo that can cut cancer risk by 61% among old folks like us. And it's high-dose vitamin D, omega-3s, and a simple home strengthening exercise program. So that's what we'll talk about. And now, Richard, what's this in our top story that, as the UN warns, humankind is stuck in a spiral of self-destruction?
Well, I don't think this qualifies as a good news story, but the United Nations has issued yet another terrifying report about our near future. And it says that we're not going to have a good time. This is something they publish every other year, and it's the UN Global Assessment Report on Disaster Risk. And this year's report is telling us we are living in a disaster zone of our own creation. One of the things that they report is that the rate of disasters is increasing over the world. In the last 20 or 30 years, it's increased from about 300 disasters a year to about 500 disasters a year. By 2030, it says it's going to be almost 600 disasters a year, about 1.5 global weather disasters a day. And increasingly, these disasters are more powerful, and they are made the condition is made worse by this collective all is well posturing from global decision makers. It seems like their response is limited because of optimism and underestimation of the problem and a feeling of invincibility. And what we're having is more frequent and more severe global disasters. And so the world needs to do something to actually incorporate disaster risk in how we live and build and invest. There is one bit of good news, and that is in the last 10 years around the world, protocols and procedures have been implemented that actually have reduced the number of people killed and the number of people impacted by the disasters. So while we've had more disasters, uh, we have had a lower rate of people damaged by the disasters. But the disaster intensity is increasing, and that's what we have in the future. So hold on. I guess we don't have many disasters here at Lakeside. What kind of disasters do we have?
Water
Any,
spouts, for instance. Don't you know? We had a water spout several years ago.
Yeah,
Trying to upset.
we have times when it rains really hard for really brief times.
But I mean, but that was a disaster. It destroyed a whole bunch of homes, particularly
Uh-huh.
of the natives. It was somewhat west of IE, I believe, near the racket club.
Sure.
Below
We
there, yeah.
drove by one of these times when there had just been one of those rainstorms, and there was an amazing amount of mud on the road and on houses near the road. And, you know, you could see one whole street from the hill that was
Yeah.
just deep in water.
Yeah.
Well, we just got a notice on our phone here in Cincinnati, Ohio, tornado watch. So you might
Okay.
be able to see it on the screen.
Okay. So you have your disasters.
yeah.
You know, it's unfortunate, but this repeated alarmist noise coming out of the UN and other bodies just reduces their credibility. If you read any of the stuff, it's like Richard says, the number of deaths from disease and disasters and weather and whatever goes down every year. It's just a tiny fraction of what it was 100 years ago. And the cost of these things goes up. But when you look at the cost of these disasters as a percentage of global GDP, it's not very, it's actually going down. So really, we're better off than we've ever been. And
You froze up.
Yes,
Fred has made the same point about warfare, that we have many fewer deaths due to warfare now than we did a century ago or 2 centuries ago.
I think that's true. I think, though, that many people would say we've got two things going on. One is that in real terms for us, things are getting better and better all the time. We're living longer, health, all kinds of things. More women and girls are getting educated. But on the other hand, the things that we depend on for the environment, the oceans and the land, we're destroying it as well. At some point, I think our getting better and the world getting worse have to intersect. And I have no idea what's going to happen when that comes about.
Yeah, an example of that is something that my brother was telling me. He's living in The Hague in the Netherlands. That's where I'm from too, but he's still there, and he has a home, and this whole neighborhood, he says, has sunken at least, and I don't know how much, but quite a bit, and they're now living just about 1 meter above sea level. But the reason why the land has been sinking is because it's drying out. I mean, of the water that we take out, and
right.
I guess the weight of all the buildings and whatever, you know. I mean, everything that's paved over, when it does rain, it doesn't replenish. It goes into sewers and then is being used probably eventually for consumption. But anyway, that's a disaster waiting to happen.
Well, if that's enough on the UN, how about coronavirus? Apparently, more than half of Americans have show signs of prior infection. What do you think about that?
Now, this is, I think, interesting. This was based on a nationwide study of blood samples, and as of February, it showed almost 60% of Americans had antibodies, 57.7%. So that's a real big group of people who they say have had the disease. I think what is interesting, though, is that in December, before the Omicron wave hit the country, they did a similar survey, and it was 33.5% in December, and it increased to almost 60% in February. So the Omicron wave came through, it looks like, and must have infected a lot of people for the this rate of antibodies to go up so high. Now, the good sign of the increasing antibodies is that maybe that means that the succeeding waves will be less severe because more people are protected.
Yeah,
Any
it could
thought?
be. Yeah. Well, I know that my son is going to be here in another week or so, but he's a little bit concerned because he is testing positive or has been testing positive for COVID, but he has not been sick.
Mm-hmm.
And this started particularly around the Omicron time when he really tested positive. But now he's been testing because of he needs a ticket, to get and fly here. And but like I said, he has not been sick, but apparently he did catch virus.
So asymptomatic COVID.
Yeah, right.
Right.
Well, what's interesting is that some of these numbers might be underreported because testing in the United States has not been up to the level of what they do in Europe, for example. The other thing is that right now, the curve, United States cases were going down. Now they're going back up again. The curve has been up. So it's
B.1.12.1.
quite a lot, actually. If you look at the data from
Yes.
New York Times, you can see it's gone up quite a lot. Countries in Europe, a lot of them are going down. The United States hit the bottom, now is going up again. But
And-
the fact that a lot of people had the COVID, probably people who weren't vaccinated, most of them, that adds to the immunity of the whole country, I believe. So because the people who have been vaccinated, they are somewhat protected, and the ones that have gotten the COVID and gotten sick and survived, they now also have protection. So not to know.
Yeah, one of the statistics in there was that I found interesting was that 90% of the people tested either had COVID or had been vaccinated. So that's a high percentage.
Yes, it is.
Is it possible that some people who are tested and are deemed to be negative, in fact, are positive? Are there a lot of false negatives?
I don't think so, actually. I think the testing is fairly good. It's in the 90 some odd percent, fairly high 90%, I believe, in terms of accuracy. Again, it depends on the test. This particular test was also not the regular COVID test, but this was a blood test for antibodies. So it is a more precise form of testing. And so it would be a different statistic than the testing statistics.
After I read the article, I got to thinking that what does it mean? Is it just information for us? Are decision makers supposed to take this and do something with it? I didn't get any recommendations or anything out of it.
No, this was just this was
Observation.
what the data is in terms of case rates.
But
Right.
does this show that COVID wasn't the killer that we were told it was, and it's not as serious as what it was made out to be?
Well, except for the what did they say now? 3 million deaths.
I think
I know.
it's,
You
But how
know,
does that compare with other things? I mean,
I think it's significantly more than you have with flu deaths over the same period.
so this is like a real bad flu, I guess.
Well, let me see if I can find flu deaths in the world.
Well, I almost think it should make us think that all this alarmist news we get is just trying to attract our attention to sell to advertisers, and that the reality is things aren't as bad as they make out.
Well, why would you want to take a chance if you reason that way?
Well, if you really don't want to take a chance, you'd never leave your house. But we all
Yeah.
probably take more risks driving the car to the local supermarket than.
I
Well,
think last week we talked about this, and the deaths in the US were up 20% from 19 to 20. 20% increase in death in total.
Well, that's
And it-
pretty significant.
And it stayed that way for another year, for
And-
over 1 million deaths.
And so here, according to the WHO, there are about 500,000 flu deaths a year, and COVID has killed, they say, over 5 million people in the last 2 years. So that would make it sound like it causes a lot more deaths than flu.
five
So
times as much, yeah. About 5 times as much.
2.5 times as much. It was 2 years versus a 1 year rate.
Oh,
But,
oh.
so that gives a little scaling anyway, Andrew.
Oh, yeah.
If we move on to technology, we hear a lot of algorithms. What I hadn't heard before was in this news story, this algorithm has opinions about your face. What's that?
A lot of the stories, I have categories that I put stories in, and nowadays, so much of the science is multidisciplinary, and it's hard for me to know what category to put it in. I put this in the technology because it's AI stories, but it's still about people. And when you meet somebody, instantly you size them up and make snap judgments about many things about them, their age and intelligence and trustworthy, just based on your first impression of how they look without any more. And so researchers now have developed an AI algorithm to model these reactions, and they ask thousands of people to evaluate more than 1,000 different AI generated faces and give their first impressions and use that as training data to be able to train the AI systems. And it turns out the AI systems got to be very good at having impressions that are just like people have. And some of their impressions, make sense given how we think about people, like they related faces that were smiling is more trustworthy, and they saw faces with glasses as more intelligent. There's other stuff that they have no idea how the AI had that opinion, and this AI is not built in with the logic explanation module that they're developing and other stuff now. And what they are able to do, they say some of the uses of this might be, uh, you know, people live online nowadays and they have their public persona and their image, and you could look at your image and see what you want to project and have it evaluate your image and try out different things and get the one that makes you look the way you want to look. I can imagine that could be real useful if, say, you were preparing a juror to testify at a trial. You could have your AI evaluate them and make them look really trustworthy. They say one of the places also they could be used if you want to make the juror be trustworthy or the testifier be trustworthy. Certainly, you would want to make your politician look trustworthy, right? And maybe you want to make your opposing politician look untrustworthy and shady. And so they have a way now to be able to uh, take the kind of snap judgments that we make that don't actually tell us anything about the person, but it still are our snap judgments. And now uh, they can do it with an AI. And as I say, if you want, this would be one way to tune up your own presentation to the world. I'm sure it also will be used immediately by advertising companies to make sure the faces that you see in ads have just the right first impression for you. I bet it also could be used in Hollywood in casting studios.
Any
So
thoughts?
It'll be something the dating websites can sell their participants. You can tune yourself up to be more presentable on the dating website.
oh, that's right. That's right. Or Zoom.
Yeah, but higher organisms have been sending false signals for millions of years. And we've got our own internal AI systems that detect false signals. And you know yourself, you can tell a false smile from a sincere smile and things like that. So probably we'll learn how to read through this too, just like we do everything else.
But essentially, you can't believe your own eyes.
Yeah, you can't believe your own eyes anyway, so.
Well, Richard, environment, we've been talking about net zero on emissions by 2050 or even earlier. But apparently, it's going to hit a major timing problem. Technology can't solve it. We need instead to talk about cutting consumption. Is that true? And is it possible?
Now, so many climate activists and scientists are trying to uh, reassure people that the climate crisis can be solved rapidly without any changes to lifestyle. You know, we don't have to go through any pain. And, you know, the problem with this is that, you know, they say to be able to prevent the worst of the occurrences, that we need to cut significantly our CO2 production I think, cut it in half, they're saying, by 2030, which isn't very long, and get to net zero by 2050. And, uh, this is a real tight uh, timeline that we're on. And the problem that we have is, renewables are already making an impact, but the growth of the use of energy is still continuing to increase. In the year 2000, fossil fuels supplied 80% of the world's energy. In 2019, they provided 81% of the world's energy. So we are bringing online more renewable sources, but the amount of energy we are consuming is increasing also at a real significant rate. And this increase has largely been supplied by fossil fuels. That's part of the problem in places now that are trying to figure out how to deal without Russian fuel is their energy needs are continuing to go up, and they don't know where they're going to get them. So we have renewables coming, but the transition uh, looks like it's still not going to be fast enough to take care of the reduction we need within the next 3 decades. And if we're not able to handle the energy growth with extraordinary growth of renewables, then we're going to be in a world of trouble. They're looking still, because of this, carbon capture and storage has gotten a lot more attention and press, but so far, still, whatever benefits are speculative because we don't have a good solution now, and the solutions we have are expensive, and unless we have some major breakthrough, then that's not going to do the job. So the scenarios we're left with that can avoid the worst disaster have us doing something like slashing global energy consumption by 50 to 75%, which is would be a disaster around the world. And so this is more stark than many of the things I've read in the last few years. Of course, if we're going to slash energy, we have to slash the energy use from the people who are most resistant, which are the rich people in the rich societies. They're the ones that use the most energy. So to cut it, they're going to have to change their lifestyle. And, what's the chance of that? There are policies that the governments around the world can take that would cut consumption, though. The first is a carbon tax that makes using carbon more expensive for everyone. Another is wealth and inheritance tax because the wealthier people get, the more energy they use. Uh, they say another one is a shorter work week. Maybe as we go to work, we're using energy. I don't really understand that one. Uh, Certainly, one of the things they say that I'm sure some of the people here would agree to is non-coercive policy to end population growth. So population growth is at the core of this. And then The last thing that still is possible to have an impact is boosting government spending on poverty reduction, green infrastructure, and particularly public transportation and services. Anyway, so they say unless we can somehow bend the curve on energy consumption, we're going to have enormous trouble about meeting the climate goals that are ahead at the end of this decade and by 2050.
Any thoughts?
Renewables are a little issue because they oftentimes take a lot of power to produce, whether it's a hydroelectric dam or a nuclear power plant or solar or wind. The energy required to produce the renewables is great.
And it's not only energy, it's also scarce materials that they depend on.
And everyone knows that standard of living is directly linked to energy consumption. So if you forcibly restrict energy consumption, you're condemning a huge fraction of the poor people in the world to a lower standard of living than they currently have. And just recently, China and India have both increased their coal consumption. In the last year, I think it went up 1 or 2% over previous
Yes.
years. So,
Well, coal was at
The guy
a high last year.
yeah, the guy is correct that we're not going to make any of these goals, and he's wrong imagining that we're going to reduce energy consumption. It just won't happen. So
He didn't say we were going to. He said that's what needs to happen.
yeah, well,
That's different.
okay, but it's not going to happen. So maybe we better concentrate on adapting to whatever comes to us.
Richard,
Time to break out Soylent Green, I think.
Richard, one of the things you mentioned was population growth. I think what people tend to forget is that we've already done a huge amount in stemming the increase in population by educating women and girls. And that's been enormously successful. The problem is we're going to have more and more people because of people who are already here, not because of how much people are producing babies. Some cynical people might say the person who's done the most around cutting population growth are people like Putin. The only way to decrease population growth is by killing people. I don't know that people really realize that. We're already doing the things that are tangible on this by education of women.
You're certainly right there. That's why I was suggesting those Soylent Green. That's a good solution. The Putin's killing people is a waste of resource because he's not recycling the protein. And we could be feeding Africa. The problem with Soylent Green that we would have is I remember from the movie, when you were 50, you had to go, or 60, you had to go turn yourself into the center and say goodbye. I don't think we would like that solution.
Well, that brings up a good point, though. All of these social changes and lifestyle changes require government intervention. And government intervention, most of these changes are looked upon as liberal changes. Carbon tax, wealth tax, on and on. They're all liberal, and with the government we have today, none of these are going to pass. And that's why my good friend John Duvall and I have been very pessimistic about this for a long time.
Yeah, that's right.
Now, if we want to move away from pessimism onto materials and electronics, apparently electronics can grow on trees thanks to nanocellulose paper semiconductors. Richard, what's that about?
Well, the present way they make semiconductors is actually not very green. It uses many scarce resources and materials to be able to make them. And here, researchers have developed a way to make nanocellulose paper semiconductors. And cellulose, of course, is a natural and easy to source material. And you can make cellulose nanofibers, nanocellulose, easily and make it into sheets of flexible nanocellulose paper. And left alone, this cellulose does not conduct electric current, but what they have found is that by giving it a process using some iodine material and focused heat, that you can turn the cellulose into conductors and semiconductors, and so you can change them from insulators to being semiconductors. You can change the semiconductors from p-type transistors to n-type transistors, and this is the basis of the technology we have here. And so they have further gone and made some samples from this. They made nano paper semiconductor sensors that were incorporated into wearable devices to detect water vapor and moisture, as one example. They also made nano paper semiconductor used as an electrode in a glucose biofuel cell to light up a light. And so here we have another way to be able to make electronic devices, and this approach, they say, can underpin the next step in making electronics sustainable and making them entirely from plant materials.
Any thoughts?
Well, the good thing about this is we'll be able to recycle old electronics by composting them.
That's right.
Yeah.
Or feed them to the termites.
Yeah.
Pushing that serious.
Well, here you could just
We
bury
are
it in your
serious.
garden and let it decay. A good thing to do. Right now, we went through the couple of boxes of techno material from a friend of ours who died recently, and there's going to be a lot of old, obsolete technical material that we just throw away. And this way we could compost it and grow roses.
Well, Richard, if we want to move on to flight, we get a sense that there maybe is alien biology around across the Milky Way. But if there is biology, there should be a lot more evidence of alien technology. Why can't we find it?
Well, maybe we're not looking correctly. The there is a famous equation known as the Drake equation that astronomy has used for what, the last 40 or 50 years to be able to uh, evaluate what are the odds of finding life. And uh, right now, the astrobiologists and astronomers think that we need to improve this equation. To start with, the equation was made before the time that our space telescopes can recognize biosignatures on planets. So uh, that certainly ought to be something that's in the equation. Right now, methane, the only way that they know of that methane can be made is by biological processes. It's still hard to see methane in atmosphere, but they're able to detect it. And these bigger, snazzier telescopes like Webb, maybe they'll be better at testing it. So uh, they think because of our increased ability to see things, we would have a better handle on this if we split the equation into two separate ones. And one of them would be the search for biosignatures, and the other one would be search for technological signatures. And, biosignatures develop more commonly, they are sure, than technosignatures, because a lot of planets, it looks like, will be able to have life on them. And uh, they also know that it takes a while to turn a biosignature into a technological signature. On Earth, it took around 4 billion years to go from having life to having technology. Uh, and so, if you start to look at the uh, technology issues, uh, those are very different than biological issues. While technology issues must, they think, originate from some planet with a biosphere, technology doesn't have to stay on that planet. And those factors really start to make looking for technical life different. To start with, technology uh, probably can outlive biology. So, biological civilization can go extinct, but the technology it puts out can continue to power itself and continue to do its job. Also, uh, they think that uh, technospheres potentially can outnumber biospheres because technology does not have to exist on a planet that can support life. For example, right now we're busy trying to build bases on the moon, and in the next few hundred years, there likely could be ongoing technology on the moon. So that would be a technosphere that doesn't support a biosphere. Also, technology could become self-replicating. So it means the technical things, if they can make new things, then they can go somewhere else and occupy other planets. Also, technosignatures can exist in space without even having a planet. And in fact, because of this, maybe these technosignatures will be the most common form of extraterrestrial signals that we get. And so it also looks like it should be easier to find technical signatures than biosignatures, because the biosignatures are hard to get. If you looked at, with the instruments we have, if you looked from the nearest star to our star, it would be hard to see evidence of the biosignatures on Earth. And so they think because of this, it's a lot more likely that we can find technical signatures rather than biosignatures, and that what we need to do now is kind of bifurcate the way that we're searching and be able to develop good ways to look for each.
Any thoughts?
Well, there's some speculation that the most certain evidence for intelligent life in the cosmos is that that intelligent life has not made contact with us.
So it's
So-
really smart.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting. I just read a book called the Humans by Matt Haig, and in this book is he talks about the Drake equation, and it's actually a novel, though it's not a science book. He talks about the Drake equation, and he's giving a presentation to his audience, and he says, "But there's one more thing to be added to that, and it's like Andrew said." Have to add the factor or the fraction of the aliens outside our galaxy that give a shit. They really don't care about us. In fact, the whole point of the book that I was reading is they sent an alien to the Earth for an intervention because we were getting out of control.
Yes.
Is there another possibility that some people have mentioned, that technology breeds more and more technology, and some of it is dangerous, and by the time we get extremely sophisticated in technology, we're sophisticated enough to blow ourselves up, and therefore there'll be nothing left? Is that possible?
Well, certainly the technologists talk about, one of the things they talk about is what they call the singularity, which is when we're able to make our machines smarter than we are. And so the question is, with societies and civilizations that have done this, do they outlive the machines or not?
I might add that part of the Drake equation is how long civilizations last.
Right.
And it's 10,000 years, I think, is what's put in the equation. So,
Right. They didn't put 3 weeks, huh?
no.
Well, I think what's happening in Ukraine and Putin saying he might use nuclear weapons, we could be within very short time in nuclear war, which would solve the problem of too many people on Earth and have other consequences.
Well, the thing about nuclear war is it wouldn't reduce the number of people so much. If you want to do that, you should nuke China or India. What nuclear war would do is reduce the number of rich people, and that's going to have a big positive impact on our energy consumption.
Well, I don't think you can limit where a nuclear war would hit, because with winds and other things, it's not just the nations fighting each other, but it's also spreading over the globe. You would have incredible
Sure.
consequences.
Sure.
We sure saw that with Chernobyl.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But Chernobyl didn't affect Africa much.
Which is in the Ukraine, sadly. Chernobyl.
Mm.
Isn't there evidence that the wildlife around Chernobyl has recovered remarkably since people have been excluded from the area?
That's right. Even though some of them have extra legs.
You're kidding, right?
Yes, I am.
But our next biological study says that maybe if technology isn't all that important, the brains and brawn will be important in helping the crows and ravens to take over the world. What's that all about?
Now, I knew in India crows were everywhere, and I knew that crows know more than we do. And this kind of supports it. Crows and ravens are intelligent birds that use tools, are able to solve complex, abstract problems, and have a language. They don't know how many words, but it's more than one. And what is less appreciated about crows is how diverse they are. Their diversity is really based on their ability to live all over the world in a variety of habitats, and they are one of the most widespread groups of birds worldwide. And they really underwent a rapid global expansion. They have great flying ability, and so they can get to other locations on the planet. And they have big bodies, so they're tough birds, and they have big brains. And the big brains are the important thing, they think, because when you get to a new place and a new environment, you have to figure out how to live there. And that takes intelligence. And the crows and ravens have the intelligence to quickly adapt to the new environment. And so, because of that, they are widespread, and their behavioral flexibility is a major factor in that, just like with human beings. They also, crows and ravens, had a rapid kind of evolution because as they were dispersing to all these different environments, each environment had a different kind of evolutionary pressure, and they evolved to meet the new environment. And so crows and ravens are interesting, and one of the things that makes them interesting is their intelligence. One component that they share with human beings and other intelligent animals is they have a long period of care from the mother or the parent bird to the baby birds. Chickens, by the time they're 3 months old, are taking care of themselves. It doesn't take too much learning to learn to peck grain. Crows they stay in the immature stage for more than 2 years. That explains something that I've seen here in Chapala, which are these ravens, and it looks like a fully adult bird on the ground flapping his wings in the feed me kind of mode to his parent. And these look like full grown birds, but they're still dependent upon their parent. This long gestation period gives them time to learn the skills they need to do so they can be the next Albert Einstein of the crows.
Any thoughts?
Well, it's well known that crows and ravens harvest carrion off the nation's highways, and they've what they found is when they do this, they usually post one member of the group on a high vantage point to
Ah,
keep an eye out for danger.
as a scout.
Yeah, and to sound the alarm if there's danger. But here in British Columbia, they've had a problem with crows being hit by vehicles on the highway. And so they got some forensic investigators looking into it, and they found out that the traces of paint on the feathers of the crows were all from big highway trucks. And it turns out that the lookout crow is able to say caw, caw, but he's not able to say truck, truck. And
Oh,
that's why these crows are being hit.
there's one in every crowd, Andrew.
Well, then, if we don't want to talk anymore about crows and ravens and taking over the world, we can talk about dimensions for our own life. And what's this about a meaningful life, meaning we should appreciate beauty?
Now, as psychologists look at people, they see that we want to have our lives filled with meaning. And they're, as they have looked at this more deeply, they see that this falls into kind of three elements. First is coherence, kind of understanding your place in the world and your connections, and then purpose in life, and then the feeling that your life matters somehow in the grand scheme of things. So they look at people's sense of their life in terms of coherence, purpose, and existential mattering is what they call it. And now they're saying, and this is based on more tests and evaluation, that there is a fourth element to consider in terms of being able to live a life with meaning, and that is beauty. When it turns out they have been able to show that when people are open to appreciating experiences of beauty, that these moments enhance how they view their life. And so they call this experience appreciation. And it represents the uh, detection of an admiration for life's inherent beauties. And here they studied more than 3,000 people and did different kinds of surveys on attitudes and stuff. And they found that people who managed stress by focusing on their appreciation of life's beauties also reported experiencing life as highly meaningful. Now, this having a meaningful life and feeling that about your life is one of the things that is important in your ability to age healthily and happily. So it's a real big deal. And this study confirmed their original theory, which is appreciating small things can make your life feel more meaningful. And for many people, especially who are not retired here in beautiful Lake Chapala, they are focused on future outlines and don't take time to smell the flowers. We do here, and that's why our lives are more meaningful. And if you want meaning in your life, then just go out and enjoy the beauty of the flowers around you.
Any thoughts?
Yeah, we have five senses: sight, hearing, smell, taste, and our body. And enjoying each one of those, not just the visual, does make a difference.
Mhm.
It reminded me of, I think just last week, when we were talking about maybe time doesn't exist. And this article points out that life happens in the present moment, in the
Yes.
now. And that's kind of related to what we were talking about before.
Absolutely. Now, in my meditation classes, one of the things that I work on regularly is what you're just talking about, the present moment and being in the present moment. And what you do in the meditation is following sense experiences, and following those put you in the present moment because your sensory experiences happen right now. And one of my own practices, and one of the things that I teach is being in the right now and walking, and again, seeing a flower and just having the experience of this flower in the present moment. And it's something that adds to my life, and it adds to the lives of these other people that I encourage to do it.
Richard, I wouldn't want to disagree with that at all. But I just read a piece by Oscar Wilde that gave a new take on that. And what he was saying, a lot of the time we can't appreciate nature unless we've already seen it through our imagination. And so artists create something out of their head. And then if you see what they've created, then you appreciate it more in nature. And I find that there are some things that of a sunset that the sunset looks much better because I've seen some paintings by Van Gogh. So I don't know how appreciation of things relates to how our imagination of them is there, but I expect there's some connection.
When we appreciate something, when I see the flower, what's happening is the optic nerves are generating a signal, and the signal goes to my brain. And in the brain, it makes some imaginary, seemingly three-dimensional real-time image of the flower. And in that process, then there's all this mental stuff that's going on in the flower that I make in my brain and see and appreciate. And some people call this our conditioning, but here you have the experience of the sunset conditioned by your memory of this other Van Gogh sunset. And so maybe your image is cooler than mine.
I think the word that makes sense to me regarding bringing these things together is reflection. That it's important to have the experience in the moment. It's good to have the imagination maybe to prepare you or to add to it. But if you don't reflect on that, then that joy, that pleasure is not going to last. And maybe we've all been in experiences, earlier in our lives when we were so busy experiencing everything in the moment that there were no moments to reflect on what we had experienced. And we drove ourselves crazy. So that's the advantage we have now, that we have time to reflect on the
For
moment.
me, I think it seems like it's just noticing, but I get what you're saying. And maybe we're just using different words to describe the same experience.
Yeah, you know, I have an experience almost every day because it's a sunny climate that we live in. In the morning, the way, you know, I have my breakfast, and as I have my breakfast, it's an elevated thing. I mean, the house is built anyway, but the curtains are still closed, but the curtains are more or less sheer. And then the sun comes up, and it comes and it fills the house literally with what I would call a soft light. And the feeling that it creates stays with me for a very long time, really.
Very good.
Well, we can appreciate beauty and have new dimensions, but we can't forget about cancer. And apparently, for people like us who sometimes die of cancer, we can really cut the risk by vitamin D, omega-3s, and strengthening exercise program. What's that about?
So, as the medical community deals with middle age and older adults and cancer, the you know really what they do is screening, and different ways of screening for cancer is their main approach to cancer now. And here these studies show that vitamin D, omega-3, and exercising 3 times a week, each of those things they have studied and found out that they reduce the cancer rates a little. When you combine the 3 of them together, and they here in a substantial European study that was done over a period of 3 years, they found that combining 2,000 units per day of D3, 1 gram a day of omega-3s, and 3 times per week this exercise program reduced overall cancer rates by 61%. So these 3 things combined together to be real powerful anti-cancer treatments. And these are things that are relatively inexpensive. Good omega-3s are not cheap, though. And it's something we can do ourselves without prescriptions. And it's something that we could start to do today. So,
Any thoughts?
Well, living in the Chapala area, you get naturally a lot of vitamin D when the sun hits your body. So it would be interesting to do a study to see if people indeed have lower cases of cancer in the Chapala area.
because we're outside more, could be.
And I'm a little scared of the sun. You know, my own brother, and are we okay?
Yeah, we're okay.
All right. I thought maybe the world started to, but anyway, my own brother and a cousin both died from melanoma because of overexposure.
Right.
And I see a dermatologist fairly regularly to make sure that you know, because melanomas can be prevented if you detect them. So you'll never see me in short pants, for instance. And then I will have a hat on just to make sure that the sun doesn't hit me. So I don't know about this exposure to the sun. You know, that I'm not so sure if that's such a good idea.
Everything in moderation, I think.
Yeah,
Well,
that's
everything I have real redhead skin, and so if I'm in the sun for 15 minutes, I burn. So I've learned to stay out of the sun all my life. So that's not going to help me, and I think I'm just going to have to start taking more vitamin D. I already take the omega 3s, but the vitamin D3, I only take 125. Oh, these are 5,000 IUs. Hey, I'm okay. I'm taking more than my 2,000 IUs, so I'm okay.
But the exercise program,
The exercise program, I walk 40 minutes a day.
but this is called SHEP. Now, I Googled SHEP and I could find nothing except things about shepherd dogs.
Okay.
So a SHEP is not something that's widely available to figure out.
No, but I'm sure that it will work. It's any moderate exercise program
Now,
is
this
going
is
to give you that result, I'm sure.
I don't think so. This is a strength building exercise.
Okay.
I think there's a big difference between cardiovascular stuff and strengthening. And I think it's somewhat clear that we have to do both. That cardiovascular by itself isn't enough, and strengthening by itself isn't enough.
One thing
I
that was
have a question
interesting.
about vitamin D. Obviously, people with different colors of skin and so on are affected differently. But is there any reason to think that 5 or 10 minutes a day, no more, but that would be dangerous for any people?
Well, they say that in the Northern Hemisphere, you cannot get enough sunlight in winter to meet your vitamin D requirements. And that's why it's so important to take the supplements. And it's so easy to take the supplements. You really don't need to risk skin cancer. You don't need to use the sun to get the necessary vitamin D. And maybe John's correct. It's not worth the risk. But did you notice this study was about invasive cancers? It wasn't about non-invasive cancers. It was only about invasive cancers, and they didn't mention non-invasive cancers and any effect at all on non-invasive cancers. So
And a
wonder,
lot of those are skin cancers.
well, I don't know if skin cancer is invasive or not, but the invasive ones are the ones like lymph cancer that spread through your system and to adjacent tissue, where the non-invasive ones are like stomach cancer or pancreatic cancer or brain cancer. The other thing that's interesting is there are some animals that never get cancer, invasive or non-invasive, like the naked mole rat. And I think, Richard, you had an article on them not too long ago, and the blind mole rat. And elephants never get cancer, and the bowhead whale never gets cancer. So maybe we should adopt their diets and lifestyles and see how we do with that.
Well, I can't swim that well.
Yeah. Well, you could take your clothes off and be that naked mole rat. That would be,
I
As
think
long
that,
Down in their holes.
yeah.
well, I think that some of these animals don't live long enough to develop cancers. I think most cancers are experienced by older individuals. I mean, it happens in children to be sure, but the greatest amount or greatest number of cancer cases are people that are a little older.
Yeah, and there's no evolutionary reason why we would eliminate cancer, because by the time we're 50 years old, we should have successfully replicated and no
Yeah.
longer really need
Necessary.
to. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
we're ready for the Soylent Green, huh?
Yeah.
Well, Richard, thanks a lot. And thanks to everybody for participating. And once again, we'll see you all next week. Bye for now.
Okay, Richard, thanks.
Adios.
Okay,
Adios.
adios.
Good to see you.
Take care.